Hello, everyone, and happy holidays. I hope everyone is having a wonderful time this holiday season. Stay warm and safe out there. And welcome to my channel. If you love your true crime dark, a little messy, and proudly queer, you're in the right space. And while you're here, be a dear. Hit that like and subscribe button and share it with someone who also lives for the drama. Sorry, those earplugs had to go. This is LGBT. Let's get back to talking. I'm Nico. Around here, we tell stories about queer lives, the ones that ended in headlines or never made it that far. Some were victims, some were villains, most were complicated. So, pour a drink, take a breath, let's get back to talking. There are killers who hide. There are killers who brag. And then there are killers who perform. Douglas Perry didn't just murder. He constructed a narrative, wrapped it in gender confusion, cruelty, and delusion, and dared the world to watch. The media called him Donna Lynn Perry. The courts called him Douglas Perry. And Perry himself shifted identities depending on who was listening and what reaction he wanted. But behind every version of himself, there were bodies. Tonight, we're talking about Douglas, also known as Donna Lynn Perry, a serial killer whose crimes shook Florida in the late 1980s, a case soaked in untreated mental illness, institutional failure, and the media's obsession with spectacle over substance. And as always, we're not here to mythologize the monster. We're here to remember the people he erased. Douglas Perry was born in 1950. From early childhood, his life was marked by instability, emotional, psychological, and social. Records and later evaluations describe a person who struggled deeply with reality, impulse control, and empathy. Perry showed early warning signs: violent fantasies, cruelty towards animals, and a fixation on domination and control. These behaviors were not subtle, and yet they were met with indifference, short-term institutionalization, or outright neglect. Perry would later claim a long history of abuse. Some of those claims were never corroborated. Others remain impossible to verify, lost to poor record-keeping and systems that never prioritized following up. What is clear is this: Perry cycled in and out of psychiatric hospitals, jails, and temporary supervision. Treatment was inconsistent. Monitoring was minimal. Long-term intervention never materialized. By the time he reached adulthood, Perry was deeply unstable, carrying untreated mental illness, simmering with resentment and violent fantasies that only needed a trigger. In the late 1980s, Perry began presenting at times as Donna Lynn Perry, claiming to be a transgender woman. This is where the conversation needs care and precision. There is no credible evidence that Perry's adoption of the name Donna reflected a consistent or sincerely held gender identity. Mental health professionals involved in the case described the identity shifts as situational, manipulative, and driven by delusion, rather than gender dysphoria. Perry used identity as a tool to shock, to confuse, to dominate conversations, and later, to control media attention. And the media, especially in the late 1980s and early 90s, ran with it. Headlines leaned into the panic, into spectacle, into fear of queerness instead of accountability. That distinction matters because the violence was real, but the framing was deeply dishonest. Between 1989 and 1990, Douglas Perry murdered at least 6 people in Florida. His victims were overwhelmingly elderly, disabled, living alone, or socially vulnerable. They were chosen not for personal reasons, but because Perry believed they would be easy to overpower. The murders were brutal. Victims were beaten, stabbed, or strangled. Some killings appeared impulsive. Others suggested rage. All showed a profound absence of empathy. After several of the murders, Perry stole from the victims money, cars, belongings, treating human lives as obstacles rather than people. Perry later confessed to multiple killings, sometimes accurately, sometimes contradicting himself, sometimes exaggerating for attention. Investigators were forced to separate fact from performance. And even after accounting for Perry's lies, one truth remained unavoidable. These people were murdered because someone believed they didn't matter. Before we go any further, we stop here, because this story is not about Perry's theatrics. It's about the people he killed, men and women who lived quietly, who followed routines, who trusted strangers, who did not expect violence to come knocking. Their lives were reduced to case numbers, their deaths overshadowed by headlines about identity and shock value. So tonight we say this clearly. They mattered. They were not weak. They were targeted. And they deserved protection that never came. Perry was arrested in 1990. What followed was chaos. He gave interviews. He taunted police. He shifted stories. He leaned heavily into the Donna Lynn persona whenever cameras were present. The media rewarded it. Coverage focused on gender, not violence. On spectacle, not systematic failure. On shock, not accountability. And Perry, who craved attention, gave them exactly what they wanted. Douglas Perry was charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder. The defense attempted insanity arguments, citing severe mental illness. The court rejected them. Perry was found guilty. In 1993, he was sentenced to death. Decades later, in 2017, Douglas Perry was executed by lethal injection in the state of Florida. Even in death, the conversation remained tangled about identity, responsibility, and whether intervention earlier in life could have prevented the violence. Douglas Perry was violent. He was dangerous. He was responsible for his actions. But this case is also a story about failure. Failure to treat mental illness. Failure to monitor clear warning signs. Failure to value vulnerable lives. And the people who paid the price were not the systems. They were not the headlines. They were the victims. You've been listening to LGBT. Let's get back to talking. I'm Nico, your host, your narrator, your slightly too interested gay friend with a microphone. And every week, we dig into queer lives brushed out of the margins. The victims, the villains, and the beautifully complicated ones in between. If you liked tonight's story, go ahead and follow, subscribe, and leave a review. Or just whisper sweet nothings into the void. I hear everything. Until next time, pour a drink, take a breath. Let's get back to talking.